Germantown Planning Commission, and I'd like to turn it over to Mrs. Grukowski to make the presentation, please.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chairman. We have one request on our agenda this evening. It is a request for a new cell tower located at the current Office Depot site. I'm going to bring up some slides that you will be seeing later, just so that you can get a frame of reference to show. I'll show you the site plan. So, okay, there you see the property, the Office Depot property. This is an aerial view of the property. The turquoise rectangle is the location of where the proposed cell tower would be. It would be approximately 40 feet from the Office Depot building and about 50 feet from the Walgreens building. It would be over 7 existing parking spaces. The applicant did receive a variance through the Board of Zoning Appeals last month for a parking reduction of 7 spaces in order to place the cell tower at this location. Here you can see the originally approved site plan from 2000 that shows the location of the proposed cell tower as well. As you may recall, for a cell tower in a commercial area, there are 6 primary criteria. 1, the cell tower must be set back from property lines, minimum distance of the tower site is 10 feet. All associated buildings and structures must meet the minimum setback distances of the zoning district. The applicant's engineer must provide documentation that the cell tower meets or exceeds the ANSI standards for radio frequency emissions. The maximum height of the tower is 140 feet. And the tower shall be designed for shared use. And finally, there should be a minimum buffer strip of 50 feet consisting of landscaping and screening on the outside of the perimeter. The request complies with criteria 3, 4, and 5. In regards to criteria 1 and 2, the setbacks, the tower is closer to the property line and buildings than as outlined in the ordinance. However, the developer's representative has provided a technical letter that ensures the fall zone of the cell tower to be 30 feet. Thus, that requirement has been met. And then finally, for the last requirement in regards to the landscape screening and buffer, the ordinance specifically reads that there should be a minimum 50-foot buffer strip of the outer perimeter of the property abutting currently zoned properties that are residential, office, or commercial development. There shall be no internal roadways or driveways, parking areas, structures, or storage in this buffer strip. And the buffer strip shall be installed to protect the adjacent property visually by shielding internal activities from ground view at a minimum of 6 feet in height. So this would require a waiver from the Design Review Commission. Here you can see the tower, proposed tower in a photo simulation from Germantown Road. There you can see it as well. You can see the equipment enclosure. So as per the ordinance, the facility is supposed to be screened at least 6 feet in height from the viewpoint, and here it's not. And it also, as you see, per the ordinance, it says that this buffer strip should not have any parking or driveways in it, and it does. So this does not meet the landscape screening requirement. However, the Design Review Commission can offer a waiver to this requirement, as has been done in the past. It says that landscape provisions of this section may be varied or reduced if the provided plan provides unique and innovative landscaping treatment. So if you approve this request, it will then advance to the Design Review Commission, who will consider that waiver request. After that, the tower will advance to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for final review. Just a couple of points in looking at this cell tower application. One is the proposed location you see there on the property. If you look to the northern part of the property, part of the northern property is in the flood zone. This was discussed at the Board of Zoning Appeals, and at Board of Zoning Appeals, it was brought up that the northern part of the property is in floodway. It's not floodway, it is flood zone. So a tower in theory could be built in the flood zone if that would be viewed as an alternate location. It would require, however, some engineering and some additional groundwork for that. So this northern portion of the site is floodplain. Additionally, the height of the tower, 140 feet, is what the applicant is requesting. Per the city's ordinance, 140 feet is maximum required, maximum allowable height for a cell tower. You may have seen that in a staff comment that it says any additional appurtenances on top of the tower shall be included in the calculation of the maximum height. What you see before you is what was proposed, the maximum height of 140 feet. What we've seen with some recent towers is once the construction plans are approved and then they're under construction, sometimes a lightning rod is added to the top of that, which further increases the height with that appurtenance. Sheila, did you want to add anything about the overall tower height comment that was under staff comments? No, I don't. Okay. I just wanted to see if Sheila wanted to add anything about.
Sorry.
Okay.
Need to take myself off mute. I apologize. What we've seen in the past on some towers is that after the tower has been constructed, additional appurtenances have been added to the top of the tower. The current ordinance that we have allows for what we call modifications to cell towers. There's a manner modification that allows us to do different changes administratively. And then there's major modifications that would require towers to go to the board for approval, and then on to the board of mayor and aldermen. We also looked at the FCC requirements for this, and in their requirements, our ordinance is based on this same requirement where they allow for modification, in which they talk about substantial changes to the dimensions of the tower, and it allows for a 10% increase in a tower height. But it also has in here information that talks about the change in height should be measured from the dimensions of the tower or tower base, inclusive of originally approved apprentices and any modification that was approved. Because of these two different ordinances and the fact that our ordinance does not allow for any type of accessory structure or additional equipment to be added to the tower, per se, we want to ask the city attorney to weigh in on this, to look at both the current city ordinance and then look at the FCC requirement and determine whether we need to make some modifications in our ordinance and whether the height of the tower includes the additional height accessory structure, which may be a lightning rod on the top of this, or if it doesn't, and if it's something that can be done administratively, or is it something they can do without an administrative approval? Until that time, the reason we asked it in this application again is because we've seen this happen after the fact, and unfortunately, we have gotten lots of comments and complaints from residents that were not aware of. They thought the height was one thing, and then they see something different. So that's why we are addressing it in this application, asking whether they were going to put one on the top of that or not. Any questions? Yes.
Sheila, do you expect to have an answer for us on this issue in the next month or so?
I'm not sure whether it would be within the next month. I hope to. We have not had a chance to speak with our city attorney, but hopefully it will be something that he can review rather quickly and get back to us within a couple of weeks. So hopefully we'll have an update and some information to give you at the next meeting.
Just as a comment, when we went to 140 feet, it was understood that that was the maximum. At least that was my understanding. And I'd ask other commission members if they had the same recollection, but it was 140 feet period. It wasn't 140 feet plus a lightning rod or any accessories on top of it. It was 140 feet. So I guess this is new to me. I haven't heard this, and I'm surprised that it's an issue.
Yes, sir. Thank you for giving us that comment and giving us your background as being part of that discussion from the past.
Certainly. Commission members, are there any questions of staff?
Chairman Harless, just one more point to the presentation, and I'd like to get the commissioner's comments on this. As we mentioned, this tower will require a buffer, an exception to the buffer, and that, bring up the photo simulation again, the landscape buffer. And you may have seen in your staff report that you have reviewed and approved 4 cell towers in the past 2 years, and each of those has requested and been granted an exception to the landscape buffering requirements. As exceptions to these landscape buffering requirements have now become standard for new cell towers, we as the Planning Division are asking that the Planning Commission and the Design Review Commission look at this criteria and see if this criteria still apply, or if they should be updated, or if the Commission would like to return and start and look more to these criteria and uphold them, because we should either update the ordinance or look to a new way to look at these rather than having continual variances for the landscape buffer.
Commission members, comments?
Mr. Chairman, I had a question of staff. Sarah, is that in the simulated photo, is that a simulation of a wood fence? Is that what I see, or is that something different?
Correct. That is the equipment enclosure.
Okay. And forgive me, I probably should have asked staff during the week on this. And perhaps the DRC will look at this differently, but it just seems like when we do dumpster enclosures and that type of thing, we try to make those in keeping with the material of the buildings nearby. And I'm not sure if we have purview on whether we can request to have concrete post or brick post to match the current buildings, because that looks pretty stark, just that standard wood pine. That's the only thing I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor. Commission members, comments?
Mr. Chairman, just a couple of questions. Sarah, so have we ever located a tower that close to a driveway? I mean, I know I read the engineer's report, and it's got the 30-foot fall zone, and the building's 40 feet away, which is pretty close. It's 10 feet outside of the fall zone, but I can't recall if we've ever located a tower right next to a public drive. I mean, it's not a public street, but it's a drive. Have we ever done that before?
Correct. So in the 4 that we've reviewed recently, the Madonna Tower was located next to a drive, but that was just the drive for Madonna Learning Center, an internal drive. I am going to defer to some of the commissioners that have been on the board much longer than I have been staff. Maybe they will recall with some of the other towers that have been approved. Chairman Harless or Mayor Palazzolo, gentlemen who've been here longer, do you have recollection of that?
Well, there's a tower currently, I don't know, Tony Fisher's on this call, but not participating. There's a tower in between the fire station at Forest Hill and the community theater that's abuts an access drive. That comes to mind right now. Of course, Madonna, as mentioned earlier, but others that have been around can perhaps remember some as well.
There's one right here at the City Hall complex. Yeah. Essentially adjacent to the police wing of the building.
And then just lastly, Sarah, would you repeat that this tower could be located it couldn't be, I know it couldn't be located in the floodway, but it could be located in the 100-year flood zone. Is that correct? Is the FEMA zone AE, is that the 100-year flood, or is that the flood? That's the 100-year flood.
Correct. I followed up with the city's stormwater manager to get clarification on that, and he said that yes, with correct engineering, that a cell tower could be located in a floodplain area. Yes.
So was that discussed at all when the applicant came to the city with I mean, did they have alternate sites, one of which would have been back in there that could be screened better and off the street and not right next to the building?
So that was a discussion with the applicant, and I know the applicant will touch on this during his presentation. As you might be able to see, this, I know the presentation is small, but there are some easements back there. And the easements combined with the flood zone for the applicant makes it a more challenging area to place it back there. Staff did request that the applicant look at another location on this property, or even another property nearby where it would be somewhat more screened from Germantown Parkway, but that northern area could be more challenging due to the easement on the property.
Okay, well, I'll just ask the applicant. I'd like to hear from them, you know, some of the criteria that they looked at.
Sarah?
That's all I've got, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Doug. Sarah,
Yes.
you indicated that there had been 4 variances granted in the past. Who approved those variances? Was that the Design Review Commission?
So the exceptions that were all related to the landscape buffer. So the commission has reviewed 4 cell towers, new cell towers, the past years, and each of those 4 cell towers has requested and been granted an exception to the landscape buffer requirement. This one, the one at Madonna, the one at Dogwood, and then Neshoba Road, which is located in the LGGMW transmission tower.
And who approved? Was that the Planning Commission or the Design Review Commission?
The Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the Design Review Commission, and the Design Review Commission gets to weigh in whether it makes the final determination if the exception is granted or not.
Okay, thank you. One last question. There's a high tension power line that runs west of this property. I guess it's an LGGMW power line. Has anybody talked about putting the tower inside the LGGMW Tower?
I have not been part of conversations like that. You may ask the applicant that. It could be that this is too far for the purposes of the coverage, but you can ask the
I'll save the question. I'll save the question for them. Commission members, any other questions?
I had a question, and if we need to wait because we know we're getting close, I can. But it goes to the need. I didn't see any letters from anyone, neighbors or business owners that needed this. Has police, fire, city, do we have any information that people have needed cell coverage or greater coverage here? I guess it's Jody. Maybe I'll go to Jody with that.
Yeah.
Mr. Hicks, we haven't heard of any areas that are dead in that area that I'm aware of. I can check with Chief Beam and Chief Selber. Can I defer to Tony on that, because he's been a part of that committee as well.
Yeah, hey Joe, this is Tony Fisher. So, you know, there's not a huge amount of dead spots in there that we've seen. I think there is some, and if you get over more towards Riverdale Elementary, you definitely have one. I don't know if the expected reach of this tower is over that far, but definitely if this tower impacts Riverdale Elementary at all, that would be a significant help.
This doesn't take into account the tower that was approved in Neshoba, does it? The graphics we're seeing?
No, it does not. I just brought up the coverage maps, and as you can see, left is what is now existing, and then afterwards, post is to the right. So no, the tower at Neshoba would be farther to the west.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Fine. Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions?
Sarah, is that map in our packet, or did you just pull that up?
It is in the packet, and yes, it's in the staff report, and it's also in the files.
Sarah, did I understand that this visual graphics does not take into account the new Neshoba Tower going in?
Correct. The Neshoba Tower would be further to the west than this. So I don't know if that yellow portion that you see at the very far left, I don't know if that would be altered with the new Neshoba Tower or not, because that's not in operation yet.
but I'm assuming when it comes in operation, it's going to eat into some of this yellow on the original map.
I don't know what the coverage distance is. That would be a question for the applicant or maybe for our IT director.
And this is Tony Fisher again. I don't have the studies in front of me, but I know that around that area you have a number of medical buildings. Those medical buildings are a challenge. A lot of them have shielding in the rooms where they have equipment. They have coatings on the windows and things that really make it challenging to get radio signals in them. So that's probably I would expect this to help in some of those medical facilities that are around there that do sometimes have challenges, particularly in the interiors of those buildings.
Thank you. Commissioners, anything else? If not, then we are within a minute of our start time for the regular meeting. Cameron, you're going to do your normal thing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did we get any feedback from residents on this, sir?
No, we did not.
Okay. Tony, do you need any time before we start?
No, sir. You're ready to go.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the August meeting of the Germantown Planning Commission. We'd like to call meeting to order. Ms. Rush, if you will call the roll, please.
Mr. Bacon,
Here.
Mr. Saunders,
Here.
Ms. Hicks,
Here.
Mr. Marsh. Is he at the meeting?
No.
Okay, Mr. Hernandez. He's not at the meeting? Okay.
No.
Alderman Owens?
I'm here.
Okay. Mr. Clark,
Here.
Chairman Harless,
Here.
Mayor Palazzolo.
Here.
And we have a quorum for tonight's meeting. We now come to the minutes from last meeting. Do we have any modifications or changes to the minutes from the last meeting? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion
Second.
from Vice Chairman Bacon. Do we have a second?
I second it. Saunders.
Mr. Sanders has a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bacon,
Yes.
Ms. Hicks,
Yes.
Mr. Saunders,
Abstain.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Chairman Harless,
Yes.
Mayor Palazzolo.
Yes.
And we have approval from the last meeting's minutes. Tonight, we have one item on the agenda. This is case number 20-007. It's approval of a revised preliminary and final site plan for 1275 North Germantown Road, which is the site of Office Depot. Does staff have a presentation?
Thank you, Chairman Harless. I will bring up a presentation now. Okay. So, as you mentioned, the request before you is for a revised final site plan for a new cell tower located in the C2 General Commercial Zoning District. You see the parcel hatched here. It is currently the Office Depot. You can see that there. It is lot 2 of the River Village Commercial Subdivision, Section C. The proposal for the cell tower, you can see on this aerial photo, it is in a turquoise rectangle. It would be located to the south of the Office Depot building, about 40 feet south of the building, and about 50 feet north of the Walgreens building. It would be located over 7 parking spaces. The applicant did receive a variance for a parking reduction from the Board of Zoning Appeals last month to place a cell tower on 7 existing parking spaces. So there again, you see the originally approved site plan with the proposed location for the cell tower. Here you see the proposed site plan. To the north of the site, there is an area that is in floodplain, not floodway, but floodplain. And to the south, where the proposed cell tower is, that area, while bounded by some private water and sewer easements, is not in floodplain. The cell tower proposed would be a 40-foot monopole tower. It would accommodate 4 carriers. Per the City of Germantown zoning ordinance, there are criteria to approve a cell tower in the zoning ordinance in this commercial area. Number 1, the cell tower must be set back from property lines a minimum distance of the tower's height plus 10 feet. All associated buildings and structures must meet the minimum setback distance for the zoning district. The applicant's engineer must provide documentation that the cell tower meets or exceeds the ANSI standards for radio frequency emissions. The cell tower maximum height is 140 feet. Number 5, the cell tower shall be designed for shared uses, meaning multiple carriers. And number 6, there is a minimum buffer strip of 50 feet, which consists of landscaping and screening on the outer perimeter of the property. So here is the landscaped area of the cell tower proposed cell tower compound. The criteria I just outlined, the proposed cell tower does numbers 3, 4, and 5. Pertaining to numbers 1 and 2, which are to the setbacks from the property lines, the proposed cell tower is closer, as you can see here, than its height plus 10 feet. It's about 40 feet from the Office Depot building and approximately 50 feet to the Walgreens building. However, they have provided a letter that the fall zone is approximately 30 feet for this cell tower. So therefore, that fulfills that requirement. In regards to the landscape buffer, the ordinance specifically says that there should be a 50-foot buffer strip around the property abutting other commercial zone properties as well as residential and office properties. In that buffer strip, there should be no internal roadways or driveways, parking areas, structures, or storage materials. The buffer strip should consist of plantings and screenings and should screen 6 to 6 feet in height. Here you can see the proposed cell tower compound. It's the cedar fence towards the back, as that would be viewed from from Germantown Parkway, from the front of the property. If the commission recommends approval of this cell tower, then it would advance to the Design Review Commission. The Design Review Commission is the board that would then make the determination whether to grant the landscape exception that we have just talked about. If the DRC does approve this proposed cell tower, then it would advance to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for final review. This concludes staff's presentation. The applicant is here and will also be making a presentation. As you know, with this virtual format, we don't actually have citizens dial into the meeting, but rather they are given the opportunity to provide public comment via a dedicated email address. We have not received any public comments on this actual item. So that concludes staff's presentation, and we are here for comments if you have any. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Do we have questions of staff? None? The applicant would like to make a presentation. I would ask the applicant to state their name and address for the record and then make the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Michael Fay, Prime Development Group, 7520 Capitol Drive, Germantown, Tennessee. First of all, thank you all for joining us for just one case tonight. We are dealing with a very unique piece of property, a very unique situation. But before we begin, at the BZA, Chairman, I presented this matter that the area north of our site was in the floodway. After a careful review of that, I have more documents to go over that, but I wanted to make sure that misrepresentation was clarified. It is a blue line ditch. It is a blue line ditch in the state of Tennessee, and it is also subject to backwater from the flood. I have a presentation I'll show you in a few minutes. And Sarah, if we could go back to your, if you could take the presentation over and go back to the landscape plan that you showed just a minute ago. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, what we tried to show, one of the problems we have with these photometric plans is when we put the plans together, by the time we put the shrubbery that you see that would be around this tower compound, you could not see the fence. So what we tried to show you just for effect was to show you where the fence would actually be. And Sarah, if we could go to one of those photo representations. As you notice, as the mayor had called out in this particular sheet, you can see the fence is very predominant. But as you show in the landscape plan, there will be trees and shrubs before that. Now, Sarah, I haven't done this before, so if you'll guide me through taking over the presentation, I know where I'm picking it up.
Okay, so you're going to, at the bottom right, you can hit present now, and then you can choose. Probably the best is if you have it saved in Google Slides.
Okay.
You can choose a Chrome tab.
Okay.
If you have it in
so do I grab, I have PowerPoint, so do I go to my entire screen?
Do you have it? Do you have the PowerPoint in a window, open in another window?
I do.
Okay, so go and when you do present now, choose open and open another window, and it should be, you should be able to select the PowerPoint window.
Oh, okay, here we go. All right.
Okay.
So can everyone see the plan I'm showing now?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, this particular plan that I'm calling to attention right now is just an aerial view of the site. It will give you a little bit better picture of what the area looks like. In the blue that you can see that I'm picking up here, that is the proposed cell tower site. You'll also notice these areas in the back. And that is really more just to give you a feel of the property. This next screen, which I talked to a minute ago, Mr. Chairman, this is the actual FEMA map that is in color, which is much, much easier to read. And as you can see in the map, as I zoom out, we will see a 261 flood elevation here. Ladies and gentlemen, that 261 elevation is also right here. So we end up with a backwater condition that happens on the site. This is also considered a blue line ditch. In the prior presentation, staff had talked about that this particular piece of property had a lot of easements. And Commissioner Bacon had also brought up, hey, why can't we go up in this north area? Well, when you see these particular areas in color, I want to call to your attention, we have a drain easement that's the primary drainage for the property that goes under those 4 parking spaces. We also have a water easement that goes through that area. And also, as you can see in here, these dashed lines, there's an ingress and egress easement that goes through. Beyond that, this is the dumpster for Le Bonheur. This is a transformer that feeds this whole area. And I'll show you in photographs. This is where we had Locate come out here and look at this property. The problem we ran in with this particular site was that, first of all, there was nowhere to put the compound in. Beyond that, and I will go to my next slide. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what this area looks like. Zoom out. This area is in such poor shape that has been resurfaced at least 3 times. This picture will also show you the red line is where the electric was picked up before. This is also showing where a fire hydrant is. and once again, the electric going to the property. So moving back beyond this particular location, we spent about 2 years, ladies and gentlemen, looking at this site, trying to figure out a way that we could build this up. And speaking with the city drainage engineer, he concurred that the soils over here would be so suspect, primarily due to the already fatiguing that's going on in this area. He also concurred that was as a blue line ditch, now we would have to do a downstream water study and deal with the Corps of Engineers to build this building on piers. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about many of us that would want to build a structure in that area where it would be in potentially hazardous areas. We've all have seen what happened with the floods in some of the years in the past. So this area was ruled out, and we came to this location, as you can see now, that's where we just took out 7 parking spaces. The BZA also looked at those 7 parking spaces and its relationship to this property. And to give you a little bit more history, and I know that the chairman has already gone through this, so bear with me again. Ladies and gentlemen, when you are looking at this piece of property and we consider our primary access, on Germantown Parkway, we have a right in and a right out, a right in and a right out. But when you are in traffic in this particular area, what happens is if you are northbound on Germantown Parkway, you have to turn, let me go back to this slide. You have to turn westbound. If you're at this intersection and you want to go into this property, you have to turn westbound. Try to make this turn, but most people who have tried to make this have learned that you're going to go through this shared drive and come into the property. The only traffic that is entering this property is coming in from the north, right in, right out. The only access is leaving, going to the south. There is no movement into this direction. So when we presented this to the BZA, one of the main concerns was, ladies and gentlemen, half our access, our primary access on Germantown Parkway, doesn't exist. We have no means of having left turns in and left turns out, which limited the access, which also changed the dynamics of this shopping center. Commissioner Bacon, as you said, this is an unusual case that we're near an easement in that particular area. In some of the TAC reports, the police department representative had mentioned there is very little traffic in here. This parking spot area, according to our the building manager, maximum he's ever hit is 40 to 50%, maximum ever. And to help also with this particular case, Office Depot just signed an 8-year lease on this property this year. So I hope this gives you an idea that we did investigate this site. And I do want to also call to your attention, I'll zoom in up here. I think you can start to see how the repaving has happened recently in this area. They've had a lot of problems with this particular area. So moving beyond that, the second issue, which I know is not typically one that this body deals with, is our landscaping and our front yard setback and dealing with our particulars of this site. The first issue we wanted to bring up that when we talk about the landscaping on this particular site is it does call for a minimum 50-foot buffer. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a 40-foot buffer on the street. But in addition, we have 40 feet, 23 feet, 19 feet, 11 feet, and 8 feet. So in total landscaping, we have 101 feet. Now, one of the sections, it wasn't included in your staff report, but when we look at our development standards, where that section A does call out that a minimum 50-foot buffer strip shall be required, there's the third sentence that also is in there. It says, this standard shall not supersede any existing or future agreements or regulations which may provide for a greater buffer strip than outlined in subsection I-1 of this section. But what we also called out in our staff report, and I think this was a big issue, staff had said a variance would be required, but when you look at item in the same development standards of I-1C, that language specifically claims The landscape provisions for this section may be varied or reduced if the proposed plan provides a unique and innovative landscaping treatment or physical features that, in the opinion of the Design Review Commission, meet the intent and purpose of this section. In instances where significant physical features exist, railroads, hillsides, wooded areas, utility easements, which in the opinion of the Design Review Commission provide adequate buffering between land uses, the existing buffers may be used to meet landscape provisions of this section. Most of the intent of this particular section of the regulations was to screen neighborhoods. And in this particular case, I'm thankful that we do not have a neighborhood issue that this board is having to deal with tonight. The other issue that we also wanted to bring up to the board was when we look at the tower height in the section of the building, in the section of the regulations. The tower height regulations under 3A simply says the maximum tower height shall be 140 feet, period. There's no language about appurtenances. There's no language about antennas. And when we talk about these lightning rods, ladies and gentlemen, there is no benefit to my client whatsoever that improves our signal, that does anything that changes the way that the tower operates. It is a safety device. It is not required by code. In the prior case that this board approved, the Dogwood case, because that case was so contentious and that matter was brought up, when we had those construction plans approved, we lowered the tower height to 135 feet so that the top of the lightning rod would be lower. But ladies and gentlemen, we also ran this particular question by the planning director for the city of Memphis. I forwarded that to the Germantown director, and in his comments, this has never come up. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a 1-inch rod that's 5 feet in the air. I don't believe you could see it from the ground. We did have pictures that I sent, but they really don't show much of anything. So in this particular application, it's our belief that the 140-foot request is in falling with the intent that the Mayor and Board of Aldermen in this body approved for 140 feet. The problem we've had in Germantown for years has been the towers have been too low. The lightning rod does not benefit us whatsoever. Can we lower the tower? Yes, we would prefer to have it at 140 feet to the top of the antenna, but that's primarily our intent. When we discuss matters with the FCC already has language in the file that says at a later date, towers can be modified up to 18% more in the future, but it has to carry that load. So ladies and gentlemen, there's not a load in this particular case. And we would hope that you would take a look at this particular site, as unique as it is. Commissioner Hicks brought up the question of whether or not there was a certificate of need. We did provide that certificate. It should have been it is in your document file. And the coverage maps, Mr. Chairman, that you had mentioned earlier are, they are for this tower and this tower only. So I will conclude my presentation there and get off.
Thank you, Mr. Fay. Appreciate your comments. I now ask the commissioners if you have questions of the applicant.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Fay, I had asked the question in the executive session relative to had they studied an alternate location to the north back behind the office building there. And I get it. I mean, I see from the drawing, I don't know if that drawing was in our packet, but with the dumpster and the driveway and the drainage area, and it's just a pizza pie back there. So I get it. And certainly trying to build a foundation for something like this and those kinds of wet soils is going to be a challenge. So, you know, from the landscaping standpoint, I mean, you can't screen these things really. So obviously 140 feet tall, you know, we're trying to screen the equipment enclosure, and I think there's a lot of existing landscape there that actually will provide enough of that. So, and it was interesting relative to your comment about the certificate of need. You know, looking at that coverage map, I assume the yellow are the areas that are not adequately covered. So this tower is going to, I mean, there's a lot of, I think there was a comment in the executive session about, you know, the medical buildings. Mr. Fisher made a comment about the medical buildings. I mean, there's a lot of pretty intensive use in this area and intensive need, and surprisingly, a lot of yellow relative to lack of service. So, but anyway, I appreciate the drawing that shows the challenges to the north. So I get it.
Thank you, Commissioner Bacon. Other comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of, thank you. I have a couple of questions. Mr. Fay, I think you've made a really good case and demonstrated a good case on the landscaping, and it's not within our purview, but you will have that case to make to the Design Review Commission as well. And being a former member of the Design Review Commission, I would point that, you know, the compound, not to drive up costs, but I would hope that you would be agreeable to look at that particular enclosure and keeping it in some type of balance with the building architecture close by, whether that be brick columns on the four sides with wood, but just a standard wood or some kind of fencing, I don't think is applicable for this site. And again, the DRC will guide you there, but would you be agreeable to look at that differently on the compound enclosure, Mr. Fay?
Yes, sir. I'll get with my client. I'm certain that the brick columns would not be an issue. You know, we haven't ever discussed anything beyond that potential, but yes, sir, I will. We have not submitted our DRC application pending this board's discussion, so we can incorporate something new in that for DRC.
Well, I'd appreciate that. I know we make sure that other enclosures like dumpsters and those type thing are in keeping with the architecture. And I know some of my colleagues probably had some coverage questions on cell coverage, so I'll defer to them.
Thank you, Mayor. Other questions, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Saunders, to Mr. Fay, why could this tower not be shorter? I'm looking at a tower elevation on one of your maps here. You're actually showing 4 carrier locations at different heights, correct? So
the tower has been designed so that it can accommodate up to 4 antenna arrays.
right.
And you know, one carrier may have 2 sets of antennas just depending on their demand. But per our presentations to you in the past, all of the towers we present to you will be able to meet that requirement, minimum 4 carriers.
All right. I don't have a problem with landscaping. I'm like the mayor. I was on the Design Review Commission, I think, half of my life. But I think, you know, we pretty much can take care of that down low there. The problem I have is that you got a tower that's 140 feet in the air, but hardly anything around is even close to that. And it's just, you know, it looks so out of place when you look at it from a distance. You haven't even taken into consideration what it looks like from Wolf River Boulevard there. The only thing we see is from Germantown. It's closer actually to Wolf River, and you got just as many cars coming down that, if not more, than you do down Germantown Road. And I tend to disagree with you about the right in, right out. I come through there twice a day, and one of the worst problems we have is trying to make sure somebody doesn't run over us trying to turn into either Home Depot, into Office Depot, or into the, I guess that's a pediatrics building back there. But still, I have an issue with the height right now myself. It just looks so out of place right there. And I would have thought somewhere along the line over there in the MLGMW that y'all could have got together with them and tried to do some type of coexisting tower over there where it really wasn't quite as obstructing. And to me, coming down Germantown Road north south and Wolf River east west, that's going to be sticking up there like a, you know, I don't know why. Might as well put a welcome Germantown sign on top of it, blinking, in my opinion. So that's where I stand on it. Is that I think the height's just out of proportion with the rounding. I know you're trying to get as many you can on there and get the height up, but maybe we need more smaller towers than one big tower. So that's my point right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Saunders. Mr. Fay, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, sir. One of the issues that we have with trying to put a tower on MLG&W's property is that we only get one carrier, and in that particular location. And as well aware, as the chairman had said, that just due west, we've got the TVA lines that bisect the area that run across Wolf River Boulevard. But this particular area is a very special area because had we gone over to the TVA towers, we couldn't get the coverage we need. This particular location fills this whole corner the whole intersection rather than just one corner. This is generated by, in this particular case, Verizon, who is saying, hey, we've got a service problem here and we've got to be in this particular area. It's got to be somewhere around this property. And I appreciate your concern about the height, but I would call to your attention, the hotel that's over there, the top of the hotel is about 70, 75 feet tall. And one of the unique things about coming down Germantown Parkway north or coming into Germantown is we have quite a dense tree cover along all the street frontages. So there will be blockage that will block some of your viewpoint. The photos that we presented in the application were purposely to show you the worst case scenario. If you look up that drive for 2 seconds while you're on that road, that's what it would look like. But when you're driving in traffic, the intent was to move it to the back of the building and hide it back there in that back area.
Thank you, Mr. Fay. Commissioners, other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Hicks.
Thank you. I share Commissioner Sanders' concerns, but I'll add to that because when you look at this, when you come out the front door of that hotel, that's what you're going to see is this tower. So aesthetically, I have some concerns, but it's also, as he mentioned, Commissioner Saunders mentioned, coming south on Germantown Road, this is a gateway to our city, and you're going to see Chick-fil-A and you're going to see this tower. And the setbacks, we're not even giving design review anything to work with here. And we've kind of made that decision for them without, with what you're asking here. So I have concerns with the need outweighing the aesthetic concerns and the setbacks, and I'm not there yet. But I like the idea of trying to co-locate somewhere else, and I understand that's a challenge and not working.
Thank you, Commissioner Hicks. Other questions?
Chairman Harless, if you would like, I can bring up an aerial map just so people can see what the distance would be to the nearest MLG&W Tower.
That would be great, Sarah, because that was going to be my question.
Okay, I just pulled one up. Give me one moment, please. Okay. So I have the point of where the tower is proposed next to Office Depot, and then I have it carried out to the nearest MLG&W Tower. So that would be about 860 feet from where the tower is proposed to where to the nearest MLG&W Tower is.
That's great. Mr. Fay, what is the normal radius of a 140-foot cell tower?
Mr. Chairman, there's not really a particular radius. It depends on demand. It depends on intersections. It depends on topography. But what I can tell you, actually, our staff report has the answer to the question of why this area might be suspect. We all recall, well, some of us are older than others, but we all recall that this area where you see the All-Day Express and you see the Landmark Bank, that was a dump. That's a landfill. The Waffle House that you see down on the bottom right corner of that particular piece of property has a methane gas collection system. So as per staff conditions, ladies and gentlemen, the soils in this area are extremely suspect. And I think you can also see beyond that, you are right in that, you're on the edge of the Wolf River. So putting a compound in and putting something over in that area, it's mighty risky.
Mr. Fay, let me just make sure I understand, because recently we approved a cell tower to go inside LGMW at Neshoba. And I'm assuming that there wouldn't be a problem putting a cell tower inside this LGMW tower that we see 860 feet away. Because if it's strong enough to support the tower, it'd be strong enough to support a cell tower.
But Mr. Chairman, the tower is just part of the equation. We still have to have access to the property. We have to, for the technicians to go in there and work on that tower. And in the shuttle one, there was the ability to have access. We don't allow vehicles on the greenway. So in this particular case, there is no, there's no roadway or no road system to get you to it.
LGMW has a roadway, somehow an access to get to it. And I assume that you guys could get a access from Holiday Inn Express across there. All I'm suggesting, I'm not going to engineer it, and don't want to do that, but I think the issues of the aesthetics coming into Germantown with 140-foot towers sitting there staring you in the face, the fact that we are within 40 feet of dropping this thing on a building, the variance that's required, the loss of parking. We don't know in 8 years what might go into that Office Depot building when the lease expires. It makes a lot more sense, in my estimation, to go back to this tower if it's available. So all I would do is suggest that you at least give really strong consideration to it. Commissioners, other questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask a question. In this particular case, would the board prefer that we hold the matter so that we can inquire with MLGMW?
Commissioners? I'm seeing a lot of nodding of heads.
I would say, I just had to unmute. I would say definitely yes. Because I'd like some more information relative to exploring co-location on that tower. I think you can, the MLG tower, MLGW tower, I think you could get to it fairly easily. So I would like a little bit more clarity that that's been explored better.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go along with what Mr. Bacon said. I clearly would like to see some alternatives before I get down to having to think about, well, I'm going to approve a 140-foot tower sitting at the corner of one of the largest intersections in Shelby County with over 80,000 cars a day going through. I just have a problem. So I would definitely like to see it postponed until we have some reasonable alternatives to look at.
Thank you, Commissioner Saunders.
So, Mr. Chairman, with that being said, I'll go ahead and request that the board hold this till the next month.
Mr. Fay has requested that he withdraw the application and bring it up for consideration at our next meeting. I have no problem with that, and we will grant that to him. I don't think we need a vote on it.
One thing to consider is based on what he finds out, and if there is any modification to the application, that is a different property owner altogether. So it'll have to be a new application. While the developer will still be the same and the applicant will still be the same, the property ownership will be different.
Will that require a 6-month period, or can it be streamlined?
It would not require.
It won't require a 6-month difference. It just needs to be on the table that there'll be some application modifications beyond just the location. And so we want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. I'm not 100% positive because I just don't have it in front of me, but that may be City of Germantown property with the tower, transmission tower on it.
Okay. Well, I think, Mr. Fay, I think it would behoove you to at least explore the options there, and I appreciate you, your willingness to do that at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will get to work on it immediately.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, are there any other items to be brought before the commission?
No.
If not, be safe. We stand adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.